Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. I'm so thrilled today to be talking about the wonderful new HBO series Industry, and thrilled to be joined by the wonderful cast today. We have Myha'la Herrold, Harry Lawtey, Marisa Abela, and David Jonsson. And I wanted to dive in with you first, Myha'la, and ask you a little bit about some of the juxtaposition of your character, because one of the things I find so interesting about her is that she comes to screen with such kind of a quiet, internalized, kind of dedicated confidence and feels very sure of who she is. But at the same time, she's kind of in this very new setting. So there is a little bit of that kind of whether she's playing a fake it till you make it, or she does kind of know everything that's going on in her situation. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about how you really balanced those two sides together, and especially because this was the first time that you were leaving the country and coming over to the UK yourself. So you were kind of in a little bit of the same situation as your character.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I instantly understood this sort of underdog, new in this high pressure environment, like fake it till you make it situation, because I too was feeling that, like being relatively new to the industry and certainly hopping onto a show this scale that I had never done before. There's an incredible amount of imposter syndrome, which I'm sure that Harper was feeling, I was feeling it. But what I thought someone like her might feel with so much to lose if this doesn't go right, you have to present yourself as a perfect picture from the get. So whether or not she was really feeling it, she has to show up that way. And it's my belief that she was like deeply insecure and anxious and scared for her life. But because it felt like this was like her life, her only opportunity, you have to show up, you have to show face. And what makes that showing face feel so strong is because of how serious the insecurities are. And I am that person. I know that person. Like, you want to enter the room being like, I'm offering you the best there is in this situation. You have to take this. You have to have me. You know what I mean? Even though inside I'm like, I have no idea if that's true. You know what I mean? But what's nice about Harper is she comes in so strong, and then in the moments where she's alone or there's quiet, the rest of us, the audience, gets to see what's really going on, and you know, slowly over time, that facade, that very strong exterior, starts to show some cracks. And I love that. I love a person who's like, I'm not giving you anything, but when they're saying that to you, they're actually revealing so much more about themselves, you know?
Yeah. And then similarly, David, you know, Gus is one of the characters as well that seems very comfortable walking into the setting and kind of talking to his superiors, almost to a slightly inappropriate degree at some points. But at the same time, there's this like huge sensitivity behind his core. And he clearly is someone who also gets hurt very easily. So I was interested in the way that you kind of balanced those two sides of him and thought about the different moments where you would pull out each of those versions of who he is at his core.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard because he's the bank moves so fast, you know. Also, when we were filming, we filmed quite quickly as well, so we'd get something through like a rewrite, and then we like tackle it, talk about it in the car ride, and then we're doing it. You know, there weren't really much time to be like to thinking about stuff. And yeah, I mean, Gus has these layers to him, which I definitely tried to like look for and find. And the sensitivity thing is, I found out, was just a massive part of him. Like, you know, he gives off this exterior, but underneath it all, he's just like he's a teddy bear. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't know how to like control his emotions sometimes and how he feels. And I think that's super relatable too, you know. So
yeah. And then Harry, I wanted to talk a little bit about, in terms of Robert, you know, he kind of comes in and feels a need to present himself in a certain way. We look at him in the first episode and very much feel like he's got it all figured out. And then obviously as the episodes kind of we see him unravel a little bit as the episodes continue. And I was interested in kind of the way that you constructed and thought about his backstory and the genesis of that behavior, and like that really, really rampant desire for him to fit in, you know, in the workplace, and the way that he conducts himself in social situations as well, because it's so present at every moment in your performance.
Yeah, I think it was really crucial to sort of what I was trying to do with the part, and you know, we've got the writers to thank for that in many ways, for all of us really, because we've all got such kind of rich textured roles that have these two kind of sides that are competing with one another. And like you say, yeah, he's got this kind of brash, charismatic side, and he wants to sort of be seen as a maverick, I think. And then underneath that, there's that sensitivity, and trying to work out what drives that and what propels that was really interesting. And like you say, I spent a lot of time sort of like thinking about backstory and where he came from, and just kind of trying to walk in his shoes a little bit, really, and see why he's on this like rampage for validation from everyone around him. He like needs to be accepted, and he just wants to be liked, and wants to be kind of welcomed into this world, which I think he doesn't think he typically belongs in. I think all of us, to an extent, feel like our characters are kind of outsiders in some kind of way, and are able to play on that. And Robert's certainly no different.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of the spectrum for you, Marisa, with Yasmin, she's someone who kind of quietly really, really wants to be heard, really wants to have a lot of autonomy in the workplace, but just isn't even being given a voice within conversations on her own team. And so the interesting dynamic with her was watching her kind of gradually find that confidence rather than pretending that she has it from the beginning. And particularly Harper plays a huge role in that, kind of as a peer mentor as well. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about the way in which you brought her into screen in that way, but then developed and kind of gradually built her voice as she starts to push for herself a little bit more.
Yeah, I think fundamentally Yasmin is a people pleaser, and that was her problem at the beginning. She was never going to turn around to Kenny when he asked her for coffee on day one and say no. That was never going to happen. But I think it really takes. I think she watches Harper actually and really admires the way that Harper kind of, like Harper says, no one's going to give you agency, you have to take it. Harper demands respect, not necessarily vocally, but it just in her presence. And I think that maybe because of her privilege, Yasmin's used to just being given respect and kind of given validation for lots of different reasons, and has not necessarily been in an environment before where that's not just going to happen straight away. She has to earn it. So it takes a while for her to realize that the salad run and the coffee run is not going to get her where she needs to go. And I think, she looks to Harper to sort of see, oh, okay, she just does it. Maybe I'll just do it. And it takes a while for Kenny to sort of give her that agency. I think his version of mentorship, he gives a bit more resistance than Eric or some of the other characters, but I think that she needs to find that confidence for herself. I think Robert helps as well in finding that confidence. She uses him as kind of the outlet for, okay, this is one person in my life who I don't have to people please. He loves it. I'm just going to take that and run with it. That's fun for her. It's the one place where she can kind of throw him around a little bit and he'll take it from her. So that's a really important relationship for Yasmin.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the two of you a little bit about the way that you kind of built out that dynamic between the two of them, because it's so fun and so enjoyable to watch. But again, at the same time, they're both kind of really coming with their A game, but trying to figure out internally, what is this? What does this mean on an emotional level? So did the two of you have a lot of conversations about the different nuances and beats that you wanted to bring to that dynamic as they start to kind of pull together a little bit?
Yeah, I think we did. We're really lucky in that relationship really kind of develops over the course of 6 episodes, really. It's a really kind of drawn out process, and it's a kind of a long-winded kind of seduction of one another, I suppose. And you never really know whether it's going to go their way or not. And I think kind of like Marisa says, they fulfill each other's needs in a way, or what they want from one another is kind of well chosen, because like Marisa says, Yasmin wants to at least exert some kind of power over someone, and Robert's a sucker for it. He'll follow her around all day, and for him, she kind of represents, he can't see a young woman that's kind of struggling to come to terms with the workplace. All he can see is an ideal interpretation of, both in terms of professionalism, in terms of looks, and in terms of her class as well, something that he wants to be around, something that he aspires to. And a perfect sort of person to go after, I suppose. And they kind of fulfill each other's needs in a way.
I think as well, like Harry said earlier, the writing helped so much because in terms of the suspense, it was all there for us. There were a lot of times where we get to a scene and it might be a couple episodes in or whatever, and obviously Harry and I hang out all the time, but we're like, wait, is this the first time they actually say anything to each other? Yeah, like that's crazy. And then this scene is imbued with that, because it's like Harry and I have never actually spoken as our characters to each other. So you get that in the scenes. I think it might be episode 4 where they actually have a conversation for the first time. So like it's naturally that suspense is there. Or like, is this the first time they like touch each other, even accidentally? Like, oh, okay. And so the writers really helped with that for sure.
Yeah.
We showed that over the course of it, we'd done like every single like flirty look our faces could possibly pull. There's so many like looks across rooms, and I got to the point where I was like, I don't have any looks left in the locker. Like this is it. Like, but yeah, it was fun.
And for all of you, this was kind of like one of the first times, or the first time that you were coming onto a series and to a set of this scope. And so I wanted to ask you all a little bit about what that experience was like, and when there were things that you were uncertain about, even if it was just in terms of production lingo that people use, similar to how you're portraying that in the financial world, kind of where you looked to for clues and answers to navigate some of the situations that you were a little bit uncertain about at the beginning, because obviously I imagine over the 6 months you all became very comfortable, and also the experience of working, navigating, working with different directors, because, Lena Dunham directed the first episode, but there's 3 or 4 directors coming in throughout the season. So I imagine that was also a really new experience, having to get used to kind of different working styles coming in and working with you on your characters.
Unlike Harper, if I need something, I'm like immediately vocal about it. Like anyone who's within earshot of me, if I'm like, what does this mean? I'm just like so ready and available to like ask for help or anything that I need, so like, that was something that was very unlike Harper. Like Harper was like, how can I get around without letting anyone know that I don't know something? I'm so not that. I'm very available to be like, I don't know what this means. Please help me. But it was really awesome because like, not like I had any expectation at all or any idea about what it would be, but everyone on this set was so kind to me. Particularly, I think they were like, she's coming from somewhere far and this is new. There's going to be a massive amount of culture shock. So like everyone was really ready and available to help me. Particularly these 3 over here, like took me in under their wing like nobody's business, but that's probably because I forced the relationship on them. From day one, I was like, you and me, we're best friends. Because I need it.
She absolutely forced a relationship on us. We couldn't stand her at all. Just talking all this. No, I'm joking. No, but it was funny. You mentioned a good point, Myha'la, because I remember there was we all kind of found our way to this project, and I remember there was that one time we got the train up from Marisa and Harry and I got the train up from London. We got into the cab and we met Myha'la all together, and it was that first moment where the 4 of us, we were on our way to Lena's house, and it was the first moment that we kind of all sat together, and instantly we were just like, okay, cool, like what we doing? I think we just got behind this project, and that definitely helped the 4 of us, and just like this was like a big thing for all of us, so, and we just wanted to make the best thing that we could. So I think it was awesome. It was really good fun.
In terms of the scenes that you're filming together, there's so many great ensemble scenes purely because of the physical location of the office, the way that the office is a very open plan. And so I wanted to ask you all a little bit about those scenes in particular as well, because, and how you kind of thought about bringing your character to the foreground, even when they're essentially in the background. You still have to be thinking about those details really cognizantly the whole time, because you never know when the camera is going to pick up on you. And also even just the focus of a scene might start on Harper and end on Gus by the end, as we're kind of moving around to different situations. So I wanted to ask you all a little bit about those scenes in particular.
Yeah, it was really interesting actually, because I don't suppose that many TV sets give that kind of openness and availability for kind of detail in the work and in the characters and in their kind of chemistry together. Because as you say, whenever there was a scene on the trading floor ever, we all had to be there, no matter whether you were speaking, whether you were relevant to what was going on at all. And what that helped create, I think, was just not only a great sense of community between all of us, because we spent so much time together as a full kind of ensemble unit, but also just a lot of detail in the work as well. We all had our own kind of internal lives and doing our best impressions of someone trying to be a banker all day, you know, and like we had all that kind of going on in the background and together, and yeah, those scenes were kind of great because purely from a personal perspective, you know, just being amongst the rest of the cast, and you know, the tiered structure of the bank kind of worked its way into like our lives as actors as well, in the sense that we had like a really amazing tiered structure of actors in terms of experience, and we got to know all the members of the cast, and we had this brilliant kind of blend of characters, which you'd think would be a disaster, but just worked brilliantly. And you know, we had older actors saying to us, like, it's not normally this good, you know, people don't normally get along this way. And you know, we kind of just knew that we'd struck lucky because, you know, as Myha'la says, we didn't meet someone who wasn't unbelievably kind to us and made it such a fun place to be, you know.
And because there was the mention earlier of just kind of sometimes rewrites and scripts coming very last minute, and obviously the pacing of filming television, 6 months sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not when you think about the amount of pages and the amount of in-depth, fast-paced scenes that you guys had to film. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of how that was a challenge coming into this for the first time, and just kind of getting up to speed with the pacing, getting scripts at last minute, getting last minute lines, and also even just down to, you know, whether you had much of a rehearsal time or just had to dive in and learn to make really, really quick creative choices for your characters in the moment really frequently.
I think the great thing about that in terms of working for a TV show is that even when you get a script really last minute and you only have a week to work on it or something, you've lived with your character then for 6 months. You know, we had less and less time by the end. So by episode 8, that was really when it was like, oh my God, when are we actually gonna get this script? But I knew Yasmin better than I did in episode 3, you know, so it was easier when it's easier then to read a script, read a scene, and not have to think so much like, oh, how would that make her feel? It's like, I know her so well by that point that it kind of, the time pressures kind of, they cancel each other out. And also, you know, we were living in Wales, we were living in Cardiff, it was work every single day. And if you had a day off, obviously it was just, again, working, but on your own. So it wasn't like, it was like, oh, I've got my friend's dinner, so I can't, it was just all industry for 6 months. So I enjoyed it. I found it like a challenge and a really exciting way to work. And there was no way to overthink, which is for me, I overthink things very quickly. So it was, you know, by the end, there was no space for overthinking. And I think you actually can see that in episode 7 and 8, like it's all happening.
And, you know, one of the other undercurrents of the show, obviously, you know, is all about each of these characters really kind of competing against each other, even within their friendship. You know, that very first scene where they're all told, most of you won't even be here next year. So they know what the stakes are and they're really, really high for all of them. And then there's various moments for each of your characters where we see them getting a little bit of kind of like adoration from their boss, a little bit of attention, you know, ceding a little bit of power for themselves. And that's where, you know, the interpersonal dynamics become really, you know, even more in depth and interesting at that point. And so I also wanted to ask you all a little bit about the way in which you thought about your characters and how they would respond to those situations once they happened, based on the way that you had constructed them so deeply and so richly up until that point, in terms of like their backstory and their motivations and understanding where they're coming from.
I think it's an interesting point that as the show goes on, of course, the characters find more common ground and get closer, and then simultaneously realize they're getting more and more competitive with one another as they go. And that really puts strain on new, fresh relationships, or in the case of Robert and Gus, pretty old, you know, relationships. And that's kind of something that the show really looks at, like what is the price of success? You know, does it cost you happiness? Does it cost you friendship? And how much are you willing to put on the line for that?
I definitely found like, because of the elegance and richness of this script, there was a very clear like desire for each of us. And it's also kind of the same, like we all want success, we all want to be accepted here, and we all want a job at the end of it. But there's different reasons for all of that for each of us. So like, as I went on, like I was like, I know Harper to be this in the first episode. And as I went on, I learned a little bit more about her, a little bit more about her, what happened in her history with her family, with her ex-boyfriend, you know. And so I just kept tacking on these layers of things. So every time a new something would present itself to me in the script, I would say, okay, here's what I know about Harper, here's what she's been through, here's how I know she responds to things, and here's this new situation. In her mind, what is she going to do? But what I do know is the most important thing is she can't let anyone find out about her history, and she has to get this job. So I think for all of us, you know, this is what we do as actors. We say, here's a given set of circumstances, here's who you are and how you respond to certain kind of things, and go. And Marisa said this, like, as time went on, there was less time for preparedness, or not preparedness, but like less time to overthink. So by the end of it, it's like, here's what I know about myself. Obviously, I'm going to react in this way to this situation. And I think that really gave us, like, by the end, I mean throughout, but by the end, like a sense of urgency and levity and like spontaneity that I think makes the show really special as things start to get more and more intense and quick. But like, as far as building goes on, it's like by the end of it, we like, but from the beginning, we're like fetuses, and by the end, we're like fully formed, fledged out freaks, which I think is very cool.
Also tagging on to that point, I think it's a really good point. The script was so well written that it, you know, when you like watch shows and you're like, that's obviously her enemy and he's obviously his enemy, and oh, how is this gonna, like, that wasn't this show. I, even to the point of actually like filming stuff, I didn't realize that, oh, I'm competing with her, until like I was like doing it, you know, like it would constantly switch and flip, and you never knew where you were at what time, and you're like, oh, no, she's my obstacle, you know, oh no, it's him, you know. So that was really, really cool. Like to be surprised as an actor is a gift, and the script just carried on doing that, and the amazing actors, you know, it was dope.
Yeah. And for Marisa, Harry, and David, I wanted to ask the three of you kind of specifically a little bit about the way that London plays out in the show. You know, it captures that way in which you socialize with your co-workers in such a specific way, and even down to a lot of elements within finance within London. You know, it's like we've all either known or seen those people at pubs in the corner and know that dynamic. And so I just wanted to ask the three of you about kind of how you wanted to really approach it and capture such specificity of like what that life in London is within this industry together.
It's interesting because I've been asked this question a couple of times, and it's so funny because I never really realized that like maybe it wasn't reflected elsewhere, because it's the only element I know of like finance is like London, and you know, going out to clubs or whatever, and there's always a couple tables at those clubs where the people that come over are like, you're like, what do you do? And they're like, I work in finance. And I'm like, of course you do. Like, of course. I don't know why I didn't register that anyway. And then suddenly you start playing these people and you're like, oh, that's who I'm playing now. Because I don't know that many people that live in this world. So you're like, oh, those people, that's who this is. And like you say, the people that like at those corners in those pubs. And it was really fun to play. It's a really fun thing. And actually, you know, there's obviously so many opinions out there about finance and bankers and stuff, but essentially, you know, this is a world where objectively it's easy to objectively succeed, because if the way of keeping score is money, then you know whether or not you're winning. And I think it takes a specific type of person to want to objectively succeed. You know, it's very not similar to acting, where you could be the best and just completely fall by the wayside. There are so many talented people out there that the world doesn't know. But I completely understand I understand why people would want to enter into an industry where if you're good, you succeed. That makes sense to me, you know, and that's this world. And I think that as we're all saying that what these people really want is to be accepted and, you know, to be admired. And I think it makes sense that this is the job that they want to fall into. Also, it's a huge adrenaline rush, I think, when you make this kind of a deal and you earn someone, you know, she puts in that money for Nicole at the beginning in the first episode. I think that's like I think that's like 500 million or something. I think that's how much money she's dealing with. So to make, it's crazy, you know. So I think just to play those people was really, really fun. And I'm really enjoying their responses to the show, because I was scared that you would be like, no, but I think a lot of them are liking it, so that's really important to me.
And
Yeah.
David, one of the aspects of your character, Gus, that I found so interesting was that he's clearly had this drive and ambition, like since he came out of the womb. You know, it's like he's made that list of like, I'm going to be prime minister by the time I'm 55, and even kind of has that cocky assuredness where he writes it down because he sees that as being like a piece of memorabilia that's going to live somewhere in the future. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how that was a really valuable tool in understanding the way that he approaches a lot of situations and a lot of interactions with the other characters throughout the series.
Yeah. It was. I read. Funny, I remember reading that really early on before I even got cast, and I was like, this kid is a G. Like, he's so dope. I was like, how's he gonna write everything he wants to do so quickly? No, I mean, it was a pleasure doing, figuring all that kind of stuff out with him, because he's so ahead. One thing for Gus I did quite a lot of was like a lot of reading, because he thinks so quickly. He knows where he is, he knows what he's doing much quicker than I tend to do in my normal life. So I definitely try to keep up with that. But also, I think it is also like a culture thing. I think you come from like a certain culture, and you go you have to work hard to get to certain places, and Gus definitely has that. He's the son of first generation immigrants. They've sacrificed enough for him to get to that point. Now he's got to make that quicker. So it's not as simple as him just going, oh, look how clever I am. I think he's like, no, I need to make legacy, I need to make something better, and that's I find that very admirable. Yeah.
And then Myha'la and Harry, one of my favorite scenes with your two characters is that evening when it's Harper's birthday and they end up just staying up all night, because I feel like you captured that kind of like frenetic energy of them being a little bit drunk, they're a little bit high, and kind of the different highs and lows that they hit throughout the evening, the way that they just keep talking at each other and trying to tell each other their lives until the sun comes up. And so I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how you kind of navigated and figured out what all those myriad of beats were going to be together, and what the different levels and layers of energy were going to be that you both bring to the table so brilliantly.
First of all, we're so excited to talk about this. But first, just really quick, I have to say it was very kind of you to say that they were a little bit drunk and a little bit high. That's a massive understatement. They were comped, zeroed out, nothing at play anymore. Go on, Harry.
No, I was just going to say, it's cool that you asked about it. Like, that's my favorite scene in the whole show, of ones that I was in anyway. There's other scenes that I love, and that's just because it was so fun to film. Like, we'd done a lot of scenes. We crammed in about 3 scenes that day. And by this point, it's like 7:15, 7:30. And like Ed Lilly, our director, said, we've got this kind of like drunk montage thing to do. We're probably going to have to run into tomorrow. We definitely don't have enough time to do it, but maybe we should just talk about it. It's gonna be something that we improv pretty much. And then we ended up giving it a go, and like in half an hour we just kind of like smashed out all these different setups, and Ed was brilliant. He just like let us run and do whatever we wanted, and we could like run around the house and find funny stuff. Like, that's how I ended up in the sunglasses and the crazy jacket. Like, it was like full on play, which is so rare in a big sort of film production, because so many things, quite right for the micromanaged and planned, because there's so many cogs at play. And so to have a moment where you could just do what you want and improvise and see what comes of it was like completely liberating and just good fun. Like, it was mad.
That's like an actor's dream. You put them in a room and they say, go crazy. And then also to do it with someone that you are very close friends with. It was literally just me and Harry were like, let's go, let's do whatever. It was also nice because there's like little bits in there where we sort of reveal some stuff about our character's past that was not written, like nothing in that scene was written, none of it. So we sort of got an opportunity to say, oh, I'm going to toss in, like Harper says a little something about like, yeah, my friends are nice and cool, but like I'm growing out of them, or I'm just here for work. And Robert says a little bit something about his relationship with Gus. I say something nice about the budding relationship with Yasmin. But Harry really hit the nail on the head. Like, there is nothing like somebody saying, we're going to put the cameras up and you just go crazy. And it also gave us an opportunity to experience like some uncharted territory of the inner lives of these characters. And like it was also a good opportunity to sort of set up this relationship between Harper and Robert that we don't see much of, really. Like, stuff is clearly happening behind the scenes, and then they suddenly have a working conversation about dating apps, and suddenly he's like, do you want to go have a drink? So we don't really see anything in between except for that little bit is like, this is where this relationship sort of started. It was a huge pleasure, and you got to applaud Ed and the whole camera team that just let us go nuts, and they were like, we'll just follow you, and it turned out to be something really like special and beautiful. So props and kudos to them for that.
Yeah. And then Marisa, you know, with Yasmin, one of the aspects that it's so enjoyable to watch her character experience is kind of being a young woman really coming into and trying to figure out her sexuality and being very experimental in those ways. And so I wanted to ask about, you know, how you thought about approaching that and kind of what it meant to you to be able to portray that sort of plot line, because we so rarely see that on screen.
Yeah, it was really important to me to I felt it was a huge honor to get given a script where a woman, this young girl, like she has a lot of issues with confidence in other ways, like how to turn men down with Kenny, or like how to kind of make her voice heard at work. But she is not shy about using her body and like about sort of wrapping men around her little finger when they kind of give her the opportunity to. And I kind of made a pact with myself that was like, you need to just embody that level of confidence, and you would be letting Yasmin down and letting like every young girl that watches this show down if you ever pretend that you're shy, or if you ever kind of like, you know, as the actor have a moment of self-consciousness. It was actually really freeing to play a character who is like full stop like in love with her own body. And you know, I think that's hard for young women nowadays, and like, you know, and men, just to completely accept themselves, but like how amazing to get to play a person who is, and like I don't want there to be any excuses for that. Like I want it just like unashamedly, like Yasmin's here to play when it comes to like that. The only moment that I like is where you kind of see her get a bit like whoa is in episode 4 when she goes to the bathroom, and and there's that moment where I look in the mirror and I'm like, what the fuck? And like I think that was important to me, because I don't want it to be like, and Yasmin has these kind of relationships in all aspects of her life. You know, it's fun to watch a young woman play with a guy the way she does with Yasmin, kind of like a cat with like a ball of yarn, like, and be, but kind of like she takes herself by surprise. There are a couple moments where her own confidence takes her by surprise, and it was really important to me to commit to that fully. Otherwise I just feel like I would be letting young women and women down.
Yeah. Well, I loved watching all of your characters so much on this series. Congratulations on such fantastic performances, and thank you so much for chatting with us today about all of this.
Thank you.